Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are going to reverse engineer the psychological engine behind sitcom television's most hilariously complicated character. You know, Ross Geller might be a paleontologist and a devoted father, but as our source material reveals, he is frequently the funniest person in the room. And the way he achieves this, it's entirely unique. So let's dive right in by asking the ultimate question based on our source text: what exactly makes his iconic disasters so incredibly memorable? Looking back at 10 seasons of television, there are these specific golden moments that define his character. We really want to understand the exact gears turning in his head that transform an ordinary, everyday situation into an absolute masterpiece of comedy.
The core premise of his humor is actually really fascinating. Ross rarely has to deliver a traditional punchline to make us laugh. His comedy isn't about telling jokes at all. Instead, it's all about his complete and utter inability to handle a stressful situation. Literally, all you do is add a serious problem, apply a little bit of pressure, strip away any sense of calm, and boom, pure comedy naturally happens.
Which brings us to this setup for his fatal flaw. Section 1. Confidence colliding with reality. This is perfectly demonstrated in Season 5 when a totally simple furniture delivery goes horribly, wonderfully wrong. Now, on paper, this is a completely solvable problem, right? It's a couch, there are stairs, you just move the couch up the stairs. It is simple geometry, but a Ross with a plan is dangerously oblivious to his surroundings. He truly believes that just because he's mapped it out in his head, reality simply must comply. And that brings us to the moment that turned him into a walking meme. As he, Rachel, and Chandler desperately try to maneuver this massive sofa around a tight staircase, it is abundantly clear the sofa is too large to make the turn. But Ross, no way. He refuses to accept the laws of physics. Instead of adapting, he simply screams the single instruction, "Pivot," over and over again, totally ignoring his friend's warnings. The crucial point here is that the joke isn't just the word itself. The real hilarity comes from his absolute unshakable conviction colliding headfirst with reality. Eventually, we all know the sofa has to be sawed in half, but this perfectly establishes his greatest comedic strength. He can be completely mathematically wrong, all while sounding incredibly certain that he is the smartest person in the room.
Because it's not just logic that he's fighting with, it's the physical world itself. Let's move to Section 2, Physical Comedy, Escalating Disasters, and see how this builds into terrifying survival situations. This brilliantly illustrates the escalation we see time and time again. Just look at the timeline of the infamous leather pants disaster. He buys a questionable outfit for a New Year's resolution. He gets unbearably hot on a date, retreats to a bathroom, and takes them off. Simple enough, right? But then he can't get them back on. Instead of just asking for help, he tries to problem solve using baby powder and then lotion, creating an absolutely catastrophic paste. A slightly bad fashion choice traps him outside his own pants, covered in paste, treating a ridiculous mistake like a genuine life-or-death emergency. Whether it's the paste pants or that other infamous episode where he fundamentally misunderstands how to count in a spray tan booth, it all boils down to this brilliant, rhythmic formula. Step 1, a small mistake becomes a crisis. Step 2, the crisis becomes panic. And Step 3, the panic becomes comedy. He never just casually makes a mistake. He actively engineers his own doom by trying to fix it. Now, things get even funnier when you factor in his massive lack of self-awareness. Let's look at Section 3, Sincerity versus Absurdity, Good Intentions, and see what happens when his genuine heart meets utter chaos. Take the teeth whitening episode. There is a massive, hilarious gap here. In his head, he genuinely thinks he looks attractive and confident for his date. But in reality, his teeth are so incredibly white, they are literally glowing in the dark. The comedy is entirely derived from this huge disconnect between his desperate desire to appear suave and his complete inability to realize he has crossed the line into looking like a glowing mutant. Which brings us to his wildly executed sincerity. Here's a perfect scenario from the source text. He wants to teach his son Ben about Hanukkah, but naturally, a kid just wants Santa Claus. Ross can't get a Santa costume at the last minute. So, what does a logical human being do in this situation? Yep, he becomes the holiday armadillo. His intentions here are actually incredibly sweet. He genuinely cares and just wants to be a good father teaching his son about his Jewish heritage. But his execution is so spectacularly weird that he ends up turning a simple history lesson into a bizarre, surreal living room competition between a giant armadillo and Chandler, who shows up in a Santa suit. He makes things 10 times more complicated simply because he cares so much. And that intense caring perfectly sets up the final piece of his comedic engine. Section 4, 100% reaction, the emotional engine. Consider the legendary Thanksgiving sandwich. He's going through a tough time, and his sister makes him a special leftover turkey sandwich with the sacred moist maker. Then, someone at work eats it. What should be a minor workplace annoyance instantly transforms into a deeply personal tragedy. He treats food theft with the emotional devastation of a major life event, spiraling into a total, unchecked meltdown. Why does he do this? Well, it's because of his baseline number 100. The source makes a great point that Ross has an enormous emotional engine. When things go wrong, he doesn't react at 10% or even 50%. He goes straight to 100, and sometimes he manages to go even further than that. This hits its absolute peak when he discovers his ex-girlfriend Rachel and his good friend Joey are dating. Naturally, this is a lot to process, but instead of just admitting that, he desperately tries to convince everyone that he has zero problem with it, repeating these two little words, "I'm fine." This scene is legendary precisely because he is trying so incredibly hard to control the situation, but his underlying emotions completely betray his words. He tries to control the narrative, but his erratic behavior, his unnaturally high-pitched voice, and his frantic facial expressions just keep exposing him. The harder he tries to be fine, the less fine he clearly is. Ultimately, the source notes there's a real tragic irony to his character. He desperately wants to be composed. He wants to be intelligent, mature, and the responsible guy with all the answers. This is truly how he views himself. But the universe and, well, the writers of the show just keep putting him in situations that systematically crush every single one of those qualities under pressure. The comedy isn't just that bad things happen to him. It's that he overthinks, panics, doubles down, and we as the audience get front row seats to watch his desperately guarded composure completely and utterly collapse. And that collapse gives us the unforgettable imagery we've explored today. It gives us the man screaming in a bathroom, trapped inside paste-filled leather pants, or walking out of a booth with the most uneven spray tan imaginable. It gives us the guy terrifying his date with a neon smile, or trying to teach holiday history in a giant, ridiculous armadillo costume. And it gives us the man having a massive psychological meltdown over Thanksgiving leftovers, all while frantically insisting to his friends that he is completely 100% fine. So whenever you feel totally overwhelmed by a problem, just remember the one word that transports us right back to peak comedy: pivot. But it does leave us with a pretty fun question to ponder. Do we laugh at Ross because his behavior is utterly ridiculous? Or do we laugh because we secretly fear that just one bad day could turn any of us into a guy screaming in a pair of paste-filled leather pants? Thanks so much for joining this explainer, and keep questioning the mechanics of what makes us laugh.